Hi everyone, welcome to week 7. We're going to be looking at secondary sources again this week, but we will be focusing on interdisciplinary sources and in particular data. Now, as we briefly discussed last week, secondary sources can provide a great deal of insight into the theoretical and practical problems of the law and provide context for understanding the complexity of the problem. However, the problem with many papers in law, so in law journals, is that they only focus on the law. In modern society, our problems are complex and they're not just related to the application of legal principles or concepts. Those problems are caused by a myriad of non-legal factors, and the law is just one drop in the ocean. So that means that to ensure that there is any improvement to the status quo, we must look to solutions other than law. If the problem is caused by more than just law, law can only ever be part of the solution. So with this in mind, we need to begin to expand beyond the legal and secondary sources and consider what interdisciplinary sources might be of use. We need to think about what evidence might help us evaluate the scope of the problem and understand the problem in more detail. And then once we have got to grips with that, we then need to consider what the evidence tells us about the range of potential solutions to those problems. So what I would like you to do is think about where you can source information from that isn't just a legal journal. For example, is there information available on government websites? So particular departments that are related to the legal issue that you're investigating. Are there international bodies such as the UN or research centres that provide information and possibly data on the relevant topic? You can also look at news reports, but you need to be careful here because they must be from a reputable source. There's been a significant problem recently with fact-checking across a number of news outlets, and so it's really important that you consider where you're getting your news items from. Now, Scott's video will explore qualitative and quantitative sources in more detail. It will provide you with further insight into how those data sets are collected and how they are used in other disciplines. Now, the workshop for this week is focused on identifying some useful data and then thinking about how you can present that data. We all like consuming data that is displayed in a visually interesting way. You've probably done it today without even realizing. When data is just presented as words in a text document, it becomes really difficult to absorb it. Think about all the coronavirus information that's been presented recently in the news. So here you can see that the graph displays the number of daily tests across Australia since March. There's a lot of detail in that information, but presenting it in a graph also helps us visualize the trend going upwards, which is that we're moving to more and more tests on a daily basis. And the great thing about this is that you can then focus on each jurisdiction. So this is New South Wales compared to Victoria, compared to Queensland. So we can see that different states are responding differently in terms of their testing. So again, this information, it would take paragraphs to explain this, but it's a really audience-friendly way of engaging in a comparison. So graphs help us not only comprehend complex information, but they also help us engage in comparisons. So take, for example, this infographic available on the informationisbeautiful.net website. This is a statistic that came out in the press relatively recently, and they've presented that statistic in a visually appealing way. So hereby it's talking about the recycling rates for plastic bottles in Norway versus the United States, and they've used the plastic bottle to display the data. Obviously, infographics can be a lot more complicated than that. Let's look at an alternative. So here you can see there is a lot more data in this infographic. This one is looking at the percentage of children who are in work across 65 years. So children are defined as being between the ages of 5 and 17 and are in work. And you can see that it tells us that overall since 1950 there's been an 18% decrease. But if we wanted to, we could look at each decade and identify the decreases that have been happening over time, and that there was also an increase between 1995 and 2000. So that's a very simple presentation of what is actually quite complex data. So the challenge for this week is to focus on obtaining data that's relevant to your project. Think about the different ways that you can present that data rather than just typing it up in a document, and see if you can come up with something that's visually interesting for the audience. Now, you can use one of the free websites like Infogram to help you design a little PDF or small document that presents the information, or you can just use Word or Excel, but use their functions to help you display that data in a more interesting manner. So Excel particularly it can create graphs for you quite easily. Having said all that, I want you to focus on obtaining data that's relevant to your project. So make sure that it's data that in some way connects to what you're trying to say, so that it's useful to you to go through this process of analysing this data and thinking about what evidence it provides in support of what you're saying. So one of the tasks is, of course, to identify how this data or information helps your project. What does it say that's relevant? How is it useful? And also, I want you to do more than just think about how useful it is. I also want you to question it. Are there issues with its validity? How does it compare to other data that you may have collected on the same topic? Does it sit with a body of opinion about the law and the way that it operates, or actually does it contradict what a lot of other people are saying? So please think about analysing the data as well as presenting it.